Hi friends, today we are going to read another nonfiction book about frogs. But before we do that, I want to really quickly just flip back through the pages to remind ourselves what we already learned about frogs from leaping frogs. Because when I read Tadpole to Frog today, at the end we're going to talk about some things that were the same about these two nonfiction books because they're both about frogs and they're both about the frog life cycle. We're going to talk about things that we learned that are the same and some things that we learned that are different in the two books, because two books can be about the same thing but still give us different information. So really quickly before I read this book, let's just flip back through these pages just to remind our brains what we already learned about. So we saw the picture of a frog. We learned that they come in all colors and shapes. They all have bulging eyes and disc-shaped ears, and their powerful legs help them move and jump. We know that they hatch from eggs, and the eggs are kind of gooey, and they have then the black dots in the middle of the egg are them. We know that when they hatch out of the eggs, they are not called frogs yet. They are called tadpoles. We know that they still live underwater. They look like little fish, and they have gills on the side. They're starting to grow their legs, and as they grow their legs, their tail gets shorter until it disappears. And then the frog is fully grown, and it leaps away. So that's what we read yesterday, and some of you did some Pebble Go research on Seesaw after I read that book, and I have been checking out your super cool frog facts. So if you haven't done that, please check out the activity on Seesaw for you to be able to do your own Pebble Go research. So today I'm going to read Tadpole to Frog, and it's a life cycle book, and we've learned that life cycles just talk about how plants and animals grow. This book was written by Camilla de la Bayodere. What do I see? Here's a text feature. This is the table of contents. So Leaping Frogs had a table of contents too, but this book must talk about a lot of different things. What is a frog? A frog is an amphibian. It spends part of its life living in water and part of its life on land. Amphibians lay their eggs in water. They live in wet places, often near ponds or lakes. So some frogs have smooth, damp skin and golden eyes. So damp means it's a little wet. So this is a caption. It's telling us about this picture. That is another nonfiction text feature. Some frogs live in wet rainforests, and I can see that that word is bolded. Tells us that's pretty important. They are called tree frogs. Most tree frogs are much smaller than frogs that live on the ground. So we actually saw some pictures of tree frogs in this book, but we didn't know that they were much smaller. This book gave us some more details about tree frogs and what they look like. This tree frog's big red eyes and orange feet scare other animals away. We even have some labels. The story of a frog. What is this text feature called? It's at the top of the page, and it tells us what this whole page, this whole section is going to be about. It's the heading. A young frog is called a tadpole. You got it. It looks quite different from a frog. This small animal begins its life as an egg. The amazing story of how it becomes an adult frog is called its life cycle. A frog goes through 3 stages in its life cycle. It spends all of the first 2 stages in water. So we have our labels here to help us. An egg, a tadpole, and then finally a frog. Only fertilized eggs grow into tadpoles. The eggs are as soft as jello. They stick together in a big clump. They swell and float to the surface of the water. Inside the eggs. This picture looks really similar to the picture that we saw in this book, doesn't it? Once the eggs are laid, the adult frogs swim away. Inside each egg, a new tadpole is growing. The tadpole feeds on a small yolk in the egg and grows bigger. What other animal do we know that feeds on the yolk inside their egg? A chicken. That's one way that chickens and frogs are the same. A female frog may lay hundreds of eggs at a time. Many of the eggs are eaten by fish and other pond animals, but some survive and their tadpoles keep growing. After a few weeks, the eggs hatch. They hatch sooner in warm weather than they do in cold weather. Tiny tadpoles. Tadpoles are tiny when they hatch, but they quickly grow. Each tadpole has a long tail, which it uses to swim. It has feathery gills on either side of its head. These allow the young tadpole to breathe underwater. To begin with, tadpoles just eat small green water plants. Later, they will also eat pond animals such as water fleas. So after reading Leaping Frogs, I didn't know what tadpoles ate, but now I know that they eat small plants that grow in the water and that later they might eat small animals in the water. Tadpoles feed and grow. They grow faster when they live in warm water with plenty of food. And so here's a label showing us the gills on the side of a tadpole. A big change. When they are about 7 weeks old, tadpoles begin to change into frogs. First, they grow back legs. A few weeks later, their gills disappear. Then they swim to the surface of the water to breathe air. Their tails begin to shrink and their front legs begin to grow. The tadpoles now look like tiny frogs. By the time it's 12 weeks old, the tiny frog is about 1 inch long. So the frog is about that big. So first the back legs are growing, now the front legs. And the tail's growing shorter, and now it's 1 inch long. It's starting to look more like a frog. Froglets. The little frogs keep growing and their tails disappear. They are now called froglets. The froglets stay in or near water. They feed on small insects, which they catch with their long, sticky tongues, so they eat bugs. Froglets can swim, crawl, hop, and climb onto the floating leaves of lilies. When they are bigger, the froglets move away from their pond. They find a safe place under some plants where they can hide. This froglet is hiding in a pitcher plant. The life of a frog. Do you think that you would like to be a frog? I don't know. I would like to spend a lot of time in the water. Adult frogs spend most of their time on land. They hide from animals that hunt them for food, but they do still live near water. Frogs rest during the day. In the evening, they hunt for insects, slugs, and worms. Many frogs have green, gray, or brown skin. They blend in with their surroundings, and so they're hard to see. This is called camouflage. Camouflage helps a frog to hide from animals that want to eat it. Back to the pond. Frogs hibernate in winter. What's another animal we know that hibernates? This is because there is little food to eat and the weather is cold. When animals hibernate, they fall into a deep sleep to save energy. In spring, frogs return to the pond where they were born. This is where the adult frogs are. Soon the story of the life cycle will begin again. So frogs will hibernate under rocks, in burrows, or inside ponds. The end. What do we have at the end? I see some more text features. We have a glossary. Remember, a glossary helps to tell us what words mean. So I bet that a lot of those words that had bold print or had that thick, dark print, I bet we can find some of those in the glossary. I wonder if rainforest is in there. Those are the words I pointed out to you. Yeah, it is. Rainforest is in the glossary, and the rainforest is a forest that has a lot of rain all year round. And then we also have an index. So here's what I want you to think about, friends. Both of these books are nonfiction books about frogs. Both of them have photographs that were taken with real cameras, and both of them have some nonfiction text features. But are there some things that you learned in this book that you didn't learn in this book? Were there some new facts that you learned? Were there some things in this book that they didn't really talk about as much in this book? Here's an example. So if I turn to one of the first pages of Leaping Frogs shows us lots of different kinds of frogs. Did we see as many different kinds of frogs in Tadpole to Frog? No, not really. I definitely didn't see any hourglass tree frogs or a poison dart frog. So there were fewer different kinds of frogs in this book. But this book gave us a lot more details about where frogs live and what type of animal a frog is. And this book also gave us a lot of details about what tadpoles eat and how they grow. So I want you in your home journal to write 2 new frog facts that you learned from this book that wasn't in our Leaping Frogs book, okay? Because one of the things that we're learning in first grade is we're learning that you can read 2 nonfiction books, but that you can find things that are the same and different about them, even though they're about the same thing. So if you have read 1 frog book in your entire life, do you know everything that there is to know about frogs? No, that's why we're so lucky that we have so many different kinds of books so that we can keep learning about animals and the things that are interesting to us. All right, friends, I can't wait to see what you write in your home journal. If you want to take a picture of it and put it in your Seesaw journal for me to see, that would be awesome sauce. Have a great day.